Joining me on the news at 7 is legal practitioner Jide Ologun for more on this. Mr. Ologun, the Senate has passed the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, but there seems to be contention over the Senate's position on electronic transmission of results real time. What is the actual implication of this?
Thank you very much. What has happened is that many expected that the National Assembly will approve, for amendment, real-time transmission of results rather than transmitting through the collation center. But what has been reported right now is that that has been discountenanced, and it will further impose a cloud upon the transparency of the electoral processes. But again, as there were several arguments on the Tax Reforms Act that came out, whether the gazetted copy was further tampered with or not, we are waiting for the National Assembly to really give us the true picture, because what is presented at this point is that the old scenario is retained. It should have been, better for transparency if the results are transmitted directly rather than going through the collation center. If you recall the elections in Edo State, it was at the collation center that complaints came out. And then if you look at Section 4 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended, it states clearly that the National Assembly has a mandate to make laws for the peace, orderliness, and good governance in Nigeria. And if you don't have that sense of transparency in our electoral processes, and if the National Assembly that has the power to bring in amendments that will secure the trust of the citizens, then you wonder what orderliness we are bringing into the electoral space.
Ologun.
So,
I hear you on that. Well, Senator Baribe insists that, the Senate actually passed that and that his integrity is at stake. But as I said, we'll wait to see, what happens in the next days. But one of the major, change that the Senate did was to the electoral timetable. And it reduced the notice of election from 360 to 180 days and submission of candidates from 180 to 90 days. How might these changes impact the election process?
By and large, you see, where there is seriousness, the time frame may not be really of issue, but will the parties comply? And will the clauses be implemented? That is the case. For instance, if you look at Section 94 of the Electoral Act currently, it specifies when campaign can start, but apparently in some parts of the country, campaign has started, and some have been complaining. I mean, even the former chairman of INEC complained at a time. So who is going to implement this law? So who is going to make sure that politicians comply? So whether you retain the old days or you reduce, compliance is important. And then if you reduce it, just making the processes faster. Recall at a time, we even read that the National Assembly is trying to bring the election time, the general elections, to November 2026, so that judicial cases that may come up from the elections, it can be spent before the candidates who are declared winners settle down in office. So this is not the first time we are amending the Electoral Act, but we comply with these provisions.
So compliance is critical. And Mr. Ologun, the Senate has also approved a penalty for buying or selling voter cards to a fine of 5 million naira or a 2-year jail term. But it has removed the proposed 10-year ban on participation in elections for convicted offenders. Do you consider this effective enough for deterrence?
It's highly ineffective. If you look at the high yield profile of the electoral space in Nigeria, even if you put the penalty at 20 million, it's chicken change. For instance, for those who earn 21 million per month, so we are just talking about 1 month's salary to clear that penalty. And again, I still hold on to my argument that Nigeria lacks the diligence of implementing laws. There are existing electoral penalties for breaches. For how many have been penalized? Recall when an election took place, I think in Kano or so, recently, somebody was even caught about 25 million naira. All we read was that that money was for party agents or whatever. So vote buying were reported openly. So who will implement these laws? And then it is after you prosecute and you convict an electoral offender that you even talk about paying the fine or going to jail. So for me, those things are not sacrosanct. Politicians will always have their way. But my advice is that the country should look at how to deal with the sugar and honey within the political space that has generated the level of desperation.
All right, Mr. Ologun. We'll need to leave the conversation there. Legal practitioner Jide Ologun, thank you very much for your time on TVC News at 7.
God bless Nigeria.